Lee.
Good morning.
Can we just start with an injury update, because you had both Anthony Gordon and Emil Kraft go off after picking up knocks at Chelsea. How are they both?
We're going to see how they are this morning. Anthony was sore. It was a horrible challenge on him, I thought, reviewing it and watching it properly. And really disappointed with the tackle. And he's sore, but we'll see how he is today. Hopefully improve quickly. Emil had a really nasty cut on his shin, which went quite deep, so he had required stitches, and he's quite sore as well.
And Joe Linton and Fabian Shea, I think you told us earlier in the week they were due to have scans on the injuries they sustained against Fulham. What's the latest on those two?
Well, the scans painted a similar picture. Nothing too serious with either. Maybe Joe's slightly more than Fabi. But again, we'll make a decision on both players in the lead up to this game.
And what are the chances of seeing Alexander Isak at Luton this weekend?
I'd say 50-50 at this moment.
Following the match against Chelsea, we had a lot of messages on the radio from fans about Lewis Hall, who was available for you in midweek but remained on the bench, and other players were brought on as substitutes instead. I think it was only last week when you answered questions about Lewis Hall and told us what his strengths are, but also at 19 where there are still some areas that need to improve. Has it taken a bit longer than you would have expected for him to settle in and understand what's required from you at Newcastle?
No, he settled in fine. He's working well. I just think we need to develop certain areas of his game. As I said, we've got no doubts about his qualities and what he can bring to the team. But he's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. We're working with him daily, and he was brought in with a view to the here and now, obviously, to compete for places, but also the future. And just my part would be just a bit of patience with Lewis. I think he'll have a big part to play in the coming weeks.
And there is that expectation that the initial loan becomes permanent next summer, so you still see it as him having a long-term future at Newcastle? Yeah,
absolutely. His transfer's slightly complicated in terms of structure, so hasn't quite hit the requirements yet, but he is definitely part of our long-term plans.
You go to Luton this weekend. Firstly, I'm sure you'll want to send your best wishes to Tom Lockyer, their captain, who won't be available, but is now at home recovering after suffering cardiac arrest on the pitch at Bournemouth last weekend.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, watching the game as I did, that was a really difficult moment for everybody connected with Luton, and Tom's himself is the most important thing. His family really puts football into perspective, really. His health is paramount. Of course, it's the second time it's happened. We want to send him our best wishes from everyone connected with Newcastle.
What do you make of the way Luton have performed at home this season? Because they've run a couple of the big teams in Arsenal and Manchester City very close, and they were seconds away, I think, from beating Liverpool. It was probably expected to be a tough place to go, and I suppose the results prove that.
Yeah, a very difficult place to go. I've been there many times as a player. Looking forward to the game tomorrow. I think the games at home have been interesting, because if you go back through them individually, they ran Manchester City very close. Couldn't have run Arsenal much closer, and that game was seesawing both ways. Got a really good draw against Liverpool and competed very well. And I think they've, first and foremost, they have competed well in every game. They've been physically very good, fully committed to how they play. I think Rob's done a brilliant job there. And knowing the stadium as I do, you know that it's never going to be an easy game for us. So we're going to have to be absolutely at our best to win this game.
Just want to ask you lastly, you play on the 23rd and then again on Boxing Day. What will you do on Christmas Day as a squad? Will you be in training, or will they have the day off?
No, they'll be in for a short period of time in the morning.
Eddie, the situation surrounding Tom Lockyer, obviously you touched on it there. Will that, the emotion, I'd imagine it's going to be emotionally charged stadium tomorrow. Will that add to the difficulty for you?
Yeah, possibly. It's difficult to know quite what the atmosphere will be like, but I'm sure It will be an emotionally charged game, no doubt. The Luton fans will be thinking of Tom, and the whole game and the build-up to the game, I'm sure, will be reflective of that. I think for us, we just have to focus on our performance. We can't let that emotion overcome us and in our delivery of what we need to do. So that's what we try to implement.
I know a lot of your decisions of late in terms of injuries have gone right to the wire, and you've just gone through the list of the players there. It sounds as though you've got a big day in terms of weighing things up, and the team could be completely different to what you would want it to be, I guess.
It's going to be one of those days today, yeah, where we're sort of assess. Everyone feels different after games. There's always different recovery times. Today's the day where we assess who's fit, who's recovered from the Chelsea game, who hasn't, and then pick the team.
You said on Tuesday after the Chelsea exit that Kieran Trippier is an incredibly strong character. Has he shown that the last couple of days, and how has he reacted to what happened at Stamford Bridge?
Yeah, Kieran's fine. He is a very strong character and vastly experienced as well. I think the big thing for me is never about one individual, it's always about the collective. And that's very much how we reacted to Tuesday's game. We were so close to progressing. Of course, that was our intention. I thought a lot of the performance was very good. And penalty shootouts are always a lottery, but it's very much a collective response we need.
Yeah, it feels from the outside looking in that Kieran's the one that a lot of the other people from within turn to in their hour of need. Is it maybe had to be the other way around this week?
Well, yeah, being one of the leaders of the group, he is a very strong character. He's a standard setter. He's a role model. So everyone will look to him as they will do the other leaders in the group. But I don't think it's been any different. I think we've all been in these positions before. And I think just the team has to carry the weight forward, and we need a response against Luton. And I think that's loads of different ways to analyse Tuesday night. And ultimately, we drew the game. We didn't lose the game. I know there's that feeling of course, we've gone out the cup. I'm not trying to sort of bend the truth, but as I said, there's a lot of good to take from it. And we've exited 2 competitions. If there is a way to exit it, we've exited it in the right way, giving everything, and couldn't ask any more of the players. So I feel we have to be reflective of that and sort of analyse that properly and then move forward positively.
How is Sven after his 45 the other night?
Yes, Sven's good. He's another one that, again, we'll assess today, but very pleased with his return in the 2 games that he's played. He's looked strong, he's looked comfortable. He'll obviously take some time to build his rhythm back to its absolute best, as always when a player's come back from injury, but he's looked really good so far. Finally,
dare I ask you one about the European Super League? Your thoughts?
Probably best you don't. No, I think it's sort of came out of the blue for me, really, all the news coming through yesterday, but I think the big thing in England, I think, was our supporters of football sort of let their feelings be known the previous time that this was mentioned. And really, I think ultimately it's their call which way they want this to go.
Thanks, Eddie. Cheers.
No problem.
Andy. Well, Eddie, after the other night, you said you give support to Kieran Trippier. I just wondered what support kind of looks like to a 33-year-old who, like you mentioned there, has pretty much done it all in his career in terms of experience.
I think, as I said earlier, it's not just about one player for me. Our response to what's happened in the last couple of weeks, which has been a difficult couple of weeks for us. Firstly, at Fulham was excellent, where we were able to put our European exit behind us and really concentrate then back on the Premier League. We're still in a very good position in the Premier League. If we can generate some more positive results, we're in close contact with the teams above us. So I think that's really got to be our focus, not any individual.
I'm going to read something out. I read it the other day in a stat. In the last 100 days, your side's faced Chelsea, Man City, Man U, Milan, Dortmund, PSG twice, as well as Arsenal, Liverpool and Spurs. I'm not sure if that's ever been done before in terms of run of fixtures, but what can a period like that do for the character and the shape and the growth of a team?
Yeah, I think I said the other day that the games we've had this season have been, and I think if you go back to pre-season, our pre-season schedule sort of mirrored that as well. It was incredibly difficult. I think it can only make us improve. You play the best teams you can on a consistent basis, you'll get closer to them. That's very much been our thought behind what's happened and the run we've had this season. So I think, yes, we've had difficult moments within the squad in terms of the strength of the squad and the numbers that we've had available to pick. But I think those players that have gone toe to toe with all those teams, no doubt individually and collectively, we would have got closer, and that's the aim, long-term aim. So we're more than happy with that.
In the midfield, Bruno's started to look imperious again in recent games. Has the added responsibility and that kind of father figure role he's playing alongside Lewis Miley, has that added to his game, do you think?
He's certainly been at the top of his game the last few games, and I think he's had to be. I thought he was excellent against Chelsea in midweek. Father figure role, I don't know whether he would see himself as that to Louis, but certainly he will be someone that Louis looks up to and has been inspired by watching Bruno the last couple of years. No doubt that would have had an impact on Louis' thought processes. But Bruno's leading by example, and we need him to. He is sort of a talisman for us. He's charismatic. I think that a lot of the players feel more confident when Bruno's by their side, and he's a top player.
Just on Kenilworth Road as well, you mentioned you've played there quite a few times as a player. It's a unique experience, I suppose, in terms of the makeup of the ground. Just what is it like to play there, from what you can remember?
I enjoyed playing there. Had some half decent results, if my memory serves me right. But it is a sort of a throwback. It's slightly unique where you go to the stadium. It's sort of around a housing estate, so it's I don't think there's any other ground like it. But first and foremost, whenever you go to any stadium in the Premier League, you know that mentally you have to be right. You have to be ready for the fixture, and you have to be ready for what's to come. And Luton have got some real strengths. They do some aspects of the game very, very well. So we need to be prepared for that.
And just finally, I know you like a quote. Last week you hit us with one saying the wisest man is the one who's never had to make a decision. I wonder, reflecting back on 2023, what quote would sum up 2023 for you?
I'd need a bit longer. I do like a quote, actually. They inspire. A good quote will inspire me and will make me just thinking about something in a specific way. 2023's been a great year. We've thoroughly enjoyed every experience that's come our way. Even the negative ones push you on to greater things, I think. So we'll soak up all the negativity and the disappointments, and hopefully that can fire us towards another good year.
Cheers,
Andrew, Eddie, happy Christmas. Is Calvin Phillips on your wish list for an early Christmas present, or late Christmas present, I should say?
No, I'd never talk about any individual player. We are assessing our squad probably on a daily basis at the moment to see where we stand injury-wise, and then to see where the gaps are in our squad and see what January can bring us. But I probably wouldn't expect any early developments, any early news in that. I think it's a long month, so we'll wait and see.
You mentioned earlier that Newcastle had exited the two cup competitions in the right way, but also conceding very late goals, and that has been the sort of narrative throughout this season. Late goals costing us so much. What's your take on late goals? What do you think is happening that Newcastle are conceding so late?
I don't think there's one thing. I think I've said many times before, sat in this position, whenever you have a trend or something that's happened to your team on a regular basis, you have to analyse it. We have analysed it, and we will analyse it. And usually there's not one contributing factor, there's maybe more than one. And then sometimes these things are just happen. And I think Tuesday was one of those moments. Our general performance defensively was very, very solid. We were very good. I think we minimised them to very few chances. But it is something we have to accept and something we have to improve.
A word about your counterpart, Rob Edwards. A remarkable journey from managing Forest Green Rovers just 2 seasons ago to now managing in the Premier League. What do you see in great qualities for a young manager?
Yeah, well, I see many very good leadership traits from Rob. I think just look at how he's handled some really difficult moments. None more so than last week. The way that he handled that was extraordinary, really. To come onto the pitch and to put the welfare of his player at the forefront of his mind and be able to react under pressure in that way, I thought was class. I think he's handled himself really, really well in those difficult moments. even some really difficult games late in matches where they've lost games or drawn games maybe they should have or felt they should have won. I think he's handled himself really well. So I think he's got a really bright future.
What about Callum Wilson? He hit the 100 appearances for Newcastle, 46 goals. A tribute to a fantastic striker who's clearly going to have a major role to play within the team going forward.
Yeah, Callum has come back into the team and done really, really well. I think in a time where he didn't have a lot of training before hitting the pitch, but his fitness was of the highest level. He's been able to play 90 minutes and he's looked strong physically. Took his goal really well, led the line as he always does.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Jamie, Eddie, you talked there about being reflective on the two except from the two competitions. Do you think outside of Newcastle there's a misconception about the club's short-term ambitions and the time frame for achieving?
Yeah, difficult. I don't know what the opinion is, and I don't waste too much time worrying about what the opinion is outside of Newcastle. I think my discussions with everyone connected with the football club here and the running of the football club, there's never been that pressure of this season or next season is in terms of positions in the league and expectations to win competitions. That's all come from us internally. Of course there's an ambition, but there's a difference I think between an ambition and a sort of a target that's sort of on your back. I think everyone here wants to see growth. They want to see growth in the team. They want to see improvement. And of course, then longer term, those thoughts I'm sure will change to tangible targets and to set things that we have to do. But at this moment in time, we start from such a low base that we're just trying to build, and which we've built really quickly. And from my mind, we want to increase that speed. Everything has to come tomorrow, but there needs to be a realisation of where we're at also.
I think the last season when you did as well as you did, I think you said at the time that you had overachieved. I mean, do you think that you have to keep that perspective as you move forward? Yeah,
well, I think for me it's a difficult one because I want to push the players continually, so I don't really want to undercook the expectation with the players. I want to push them every day. I believe that we can achieve great things. I believe in the squad. I believe in the characters within the squad. So I've got a delicate balance. But then externally, I don't want to put pressure on the players. I want them to play in a really good environment. I want them to be able to express themselves. And then internally at the club, I think then we need a realisation of that we're still building. We're still very early in the journey.
Got Chris, John and Dominic, sure.
Morning, Eddie. I mean, the away form, obviously, you've referenced before and said has been poor and needs to improve. It looked on Tuesday as if you changed things a little bit in terms of the approach. Is that something you're looking to do going forward, or was that due to the circumstances of the match?
Yeah, we'll always, as I've said many times sat here, that we'll always change. Change is the wrong word. We'll always tweak our in-game performance and our way of playing, dependent on the opponent, depending on the game. Now, this was a game where it was another game in a very tight schedule where we felt we just wanted to try and save some energy. Play a slightly different way. And I thought defensively we were outstanding. We were really, really good and very close to winning. And that's where the away form is a bit of a strange one for me, because you look at the PSG result, the Chelsea performance, the Manchester United performance. I don't think there's anything wrong with our performances away. But the results in the Premier League will obviously tell you different. And of course we need to switch that, and we need to win games. But I don't think fundamentally there's a problem. I think it's maybe coincidence, just maybe one of those things. But of course we need to put it right.
Obviously, throughout most of last season, you had a sort of settled back five, if you include the goalkeeper, and you haven't really had that this season. How much do you think that's disrupted you, particularly away from home? Because you've had to change things in games as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's hampered us too much, because the players coming in know their jobs, they know what's expected of them. We work in a very consistent way, so I'd be surprised if anyone came in going, I'm not really sure of my job here. I think just playing with different players brings different challenges, because everyone plays a slightly different style. We probably haven't had the settled team that we would have wanted due to our injury problems this year, but I think we've adapted pretty well.
Just finally, in terms of the squad, I mean, you've said from the summer that you thought there was enough depth there. Obviously, you've had an injury crisis you term as unprecedented, and you've had basically haven't been able to change during games. Do you still hold that assessment of the squad, or do you think that you didn't have the depth you necessarily thought previously?
Well, I think we've shown that we've probably got good depth with, sometimes 11, 12 players injured. I think that's the biggest test of the depth you'll ever get, and we've still been competitive. I don't think there's been a game where we haven't been. So you'd say the depth is there. I think it's just taken away our power to change and to rotate and to keep players fresh, so players have played when fatigued, and that's always very difficult. But again, I compliment the players that have done that, and the shift they've put in and how they've delivered that. I think it's been at the highest level.
Jordan, Dominic Shaw.
When you look at the last 10 days or so, you were half an hour away from the last 16 in the Champions League, 90 seconds away from the Carabao Cup semi-finals. Just on that, I mean, how much of this campaign is down to sort of fine margins so far?
Yeah, a lot of it. I think it's a really good example of how close you can be and how cruel sometimes football can be. And we've had to absorb those hits. There's no hiding place from it. You feel the pain, you take the hits, and then you get back up and you go again. And that's what we're in the process of doing. I think amongst that, we have to be mindful of the fact we're still in a very good position in the Premier League. We can't lose that. It's very easy to slide into negative thinking. Let's have positive thinking. I know it's easy for me to say, but these next group of games are really important for us because January looks difficult on paper, but they're great games for us. But if we can get some good results between then and now, then I think we'll be in a great position.
And the sort of late goals I mentioned before, but how much is that down to injuries and not having the options you'd probably like on the bench to impact games? Yeah,
possibly. I didn't want to use that as an excuse, but that could be a legitimate reason for conceding late goals. Players are playing a lot of minutes, and mental fatigue, physical fatigue builds. So, yes, possibly that could be a reason. I'd agree.
Okay, Tom Shaw and Lee Ryder.
Eddie, Manchester United have been linked with Dan Ashworth on several occasions over the last couple of weeks. Have you spoken to Dan at all? Sorry, and is he here for the long run?
Yeah, of course I've spoken to Dan, but not necessarily about that. I think that's very difficult to comment on speculation, whether that be a player or someone in Dan's position. But I've got no doubt that Dan's here for the long term, but it's probably more of a question for him than for me.
How good is Dan and how crucial is he to what you want to do here as a club moving forward?
I think whenever someone's in the role of importance, that Dan is hugely important, and he's done a really, really good job in helping us in loads of different ways, building departments, the training ground. He's connected with everything really that goes on in terms of the decision making here at the football club. So he's a hugely important role, and he's been a really calming influence behind the scenes. I think his vast experience has really helped.
Just ask one about Luton. I think it was 2008-9 when you were at Bournemouth and they were the bottom league team. Maybe both teams had been deducted points. Could you have envisaged at that point that 14, 15 years down the line you're in the Premier League, Luton are in the Premier League?
14, 15 years, that makes me sound pretty old. Dear. Yeah, no, it was an incredible time really, because both teams hit with points deductions, as you say, very bleak times for both clubs, and really unsure of the future. I'm sure Luton were the same as Bournemouth at the time, where you're thinking, is there going to be a tomorrow? Is the football club going to exist? We had a different journey. We were able to survive. They went into the Football League, and that would have been a really difficult time for them. And gradually, slowly, they've built and gone through the leagues. And to see them now in the Premier League is probably something I didn't think, Bournemouth and Luton in the Premier League, I didn't think would ever happen from that point all those years ago. So both clubs deserve a lot of credit for that.
Lee, Dominic, and then Ian.
Eddie, on the penalty takers the other night, in that situation, did the players volunteer themselves, or did you have the five already in your mind who were going to take penalties? I know you had the substitution to consider as well.
Elements of both. I think we had our penalty takers and that very, very strong list of penalty takers to choose from, but the players have to want to take them as well. It would never force unless it got down to it where you have to force them to take them. But your top 5, I think you'd never force them. They've got to want to take them, and all 5 did.
And just going on a slightly different tangent on it, transfers, there's been a lot of talk about signing a goalkeeper. I know you can't mention names, even though Aaron Ramsdale's name's been mentioned quite a lot. But are you looking for a goalkeeper going into this window?
I'd never comment on any positions that we're potentially or not potentially looking at. I'd say all options are available to us.
Okay. And just on the Luton game, and obviously we've got Forest straight after that. Is this now an opportunity to really get control of things? And if you do get them 6 points before the new year, then the league table, as you say, is looking very good.
Well, it's an opportunity for us. The next game's always an opportunity to, that's the beauty of football, get back to winning ways and to try and inject positivity back into our season. I think 2 really tough games. Don't underestimate the teams we're playing. But if we can get positive results, then we're looking in a really good position.
Okay, Dominic and then Ian Mercer.
Just quickly on Alexander Isak, has there been any setback there at all with his groin?
Well, obviously he's missed the last 2 games, so he was feeling something in his groin. On the scan there wasn't necessarily an injury, but just more tiredness around the muscle. So, yeah, that's where it was.
And without him, potentially you mentioned 50-50, you'd lack as maybe a senior attacking option on the bench. Would it be a risk to name him on the bench over the next 2 games or so?
Well, that'll be down to the medical team and whether he's fit on.
Okay. Dean?
Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
Eddie, you started the season attacking 4 fronts. It's now down to 2 fronts. Has that led you reassessing your transfer plans for the new year? And also, does it perhaps lessen the urgency of recruiting next month?
I think we're just trying to make the best decision for us, best decisions for us in January. I think we've got a lot to consider. There's a lot of discussions to take place with the medical team to see who's going to be back fit and when. I think the preference would always be to welcome those players back before signing any new player. But if we're not and we see a weakness in the squad in terms of numbers, then we would have to act.
And on a similar theme, your fringe players who obviously you've needed in recent weeks, does the fact that it's just the FA Cup in the league now, does it possibly increase the likelihood of 1 or 2 of them being allowed to move on?
I laugh because losing players isn't on my radar at the minute. We don't have enough.
Fair.
So absolutely not at the minute.
Okay. Martin Hardy?
Hi Eddie, you had the late draw Paris, that wasn't a penalty. The Arsenal challenge by Kai Havertz that, according to the VAR review, should have been a red. Then other 2 challenges at Chelsea from Casado and Caldwell that could have been, we think. You've been commendable in your response to them. Do you ever think not screaming at referees like some manager does works against you?
Just a note of caution on this, we have to be very careful about discussing match officials going into a Premier League match because it might put Eddie in breach of FA rules, so it's probably not one we should go into pre-match at this moment.
Okay. Have you put an arm around Kieran Trippier this week? Or will you ahead of the weekend in terms of what happened? I think he's very experienced, but that was still quite a bit to come through on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I think you can tell I'm reluctant to talk about any individuals. So collectively put an arm around the whole squad because I think they gave everything on Tuesday night to try and win that game. No part of me thought the players weren't committed and absolutely driven to try and reach the semi-final. So it was a collective response needed, and we're going to need to show that against Luton.
I think, that's what Kieran has played 91 games since the start of last season. Not just him, but is football putting too much on top of players with the demands at the minute? Or is it a risk of doing that, especially with the more games being suggested in terms of World Cup games and Super League?
Yeah, I think I've always said the internationals have the hardest, especially at clubs that are involved in Champions League and European competition. They have the hardest schedule, bar none. They're always, probably all year round, they have to be on, they have to be at it. Physically, mentally, they have to be preparing for a game that's just round the corner. I'd like to see them maybe given a little bit longer at certain stages of the season, whether we could create a window where they get guaranteed sort of switch off time. But I think, apart from that, I think the other players are able to go and are able to play the games.
Just conscious of time, but we'll take questions from Oscar, Kieran and Simon.
Eddie, Tuesday was another good night for Jamal Lascelles. You spoke a lot about him as a leader, but just as a player, how impressed have you been since he's come back into the team? Do you think he's improved as a player since you've been with him?
Yeah, I think Jamal has done really, really well this season. I think his game has come on in lots of different ways. Firstly, I think defensively, aerially, he's always been very strong. I think you saw that in recent games against Fulham. I think his defensive understanding of what we want him to do has been very good from day one. I think his use of the ball has improved. He looks really comfortable in the team at the moment, and he's playing some really good football.
His contract expires next summer. Would you like him to stay beyond that? Have there been any conversations as of yet?
I'm not unsure on contract talks with Jamal. Just trying to rack my brains as to where his contract's at, but I think he is a part of our long-term future for sure.
Yeah, and just lastly, on the Super League, very simply, are you for or against it?
Without giving it any thought, I'd probably say I'm against it if you want a clear decision, because I like the structure as it is.
Kieran and then Simon's finished.
Kieran withdrew from the England squad last month because of a personal matter. Is he okay?
Kieran's fine.
And what do you think is the key in January going into it? Is it an element of holding your nerve as well as it goes on?
Are you talking the window?
Yeah.
I think the January window, I feel like a broken record, is always very difficult. It's an incredibly tough window to sign good players in. We did unbelievably well last year to sign Anthony Gordon, who is a top player, but not top player for when we signed him, but for the longer term, and I thought it was a really good deal. There's not too many of those type of transfers flying around, so we need to be very careful. Any decision we make has to have long-term benefits to the team and the club.
Simon to finish.
Hi. There seemed at the start of the press conference to be a bit of upset about the challenges on Gordon and Kraft. You've potentially lost two players down to really bad challenges there for tomorrow's game. Is there any anger or frustration that that's happened because of the actions of the opponent?
You never know whether those decisions are intentional or not. I'd like to think they're not. They're in-game accidents that happen. So whether anger is the right word, just really disappointed in the type of challenges that have led to us missing those two players potentially. But that's part of the game, and we just have to get on with it.